Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Pam Olson. I'm pleased to be joined today by Alexis MacIvor, who recently joined PwC after 12 years in the IRS Chief Counsel's office under 3 different administrations, Presidents Obama, Trump, and Biden. Alexis started out in the insurance branch, and before she left Chief Counsel's office, served as Deputy Associate Chief Counsel for Financial Institutions and Products, otherwise known as FIP. Alexis, welcome to PwC and to your first episode of Policy on Demand.
Thank you, Pam. I'm very excited to be here.
Now, for our audience members who may not be familiar with what FIP is, could you give us a short explanation of what FIP does?
Sure. So in the Office of Chief Counsel, one of the divisions in the national office is Financial Institutions and Products, also known as FIP. It covers the jurisdiction of insurance companies, insurance products like life insurance contracts, annuities, that sort of things, other financial institutions, banks, RICs, REITs, REMICs, and financial products, options, swaps, debt, all of those sorts of things that you think of with financial products.
So you really have the financial markets covered.
Yes. And to complicate things, there's also a FIP in the IRS. So within LB&I, there's a financial institutions and products that covers the same subject matter. In Chief Counsel, the work primarily was in 3 different areas for FIP. The first is providing guidance to taxpayers, private letter rulings, changes in method of accounting. The second is assisting and providing advice on appeals to agents and in litigation. And the third is published guidance.
Okay, so revenue rulings, revenue procedures, regulations, all of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's a very broad jurisdiction in many ways, both in terms of the number of subjects as well as what FIP has responsibility for covering. And you worked with the FIP people in IRS?
Yes, we worked very closely with them. So we were advising and helping them when they were working with agents on audit, and also trying to figure out if, for example, there needed to be a campaign on a particular issue. And we also worked with them in implementing guidance. When looking at implementing guidance, we always wanted to make sure it was administrable by the IRS. So we worked closely with our counterparts there to make sure it was administrable from their standpoint.
Okay. And presumably take input from the private sector?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The input from the private sector was incredibly important when I was at FIP. It was very valuable to have taxpayers come in and explain their financial systems, their business, what books they looked at, and how that translated to the tax return and the issues that they were seeing in doing that, and the guidance that they needed to figure out how to properly implement the tax code.
Okay, that's great. So obviously there's a lot going on at the IRS right now, been in the news a lot. What do you think it's important for companies to understand about the way the IRS is functioning right now?
I think the most important thing is for companies to understand that both the Chief Counsel and the IRS have lost a number of employees, whether they're incredibly experienced employees who took one of the early retirement options, or other experienced attorneys who decided they just didn't want to be a part of the administration at this point. So a lot of people have left and the numbers are down. So they are trying to figure out how to do more with less. When the IRS and Chief Counsel are in that situation, they have to prioritize work. What is more important? What has to come first? What's second? What can wait till tomorrow or next year? And I think it's very important for taxpayers and companies to understand that this prioritization is happening, and perhaps offer to, if there's anything they can do to help. Understanding that these employees are being asked to do a lot, and offering to say, is there any way that we can provide additional input, additional numbers that can help you in your process to help move it forward?
Okay, very good. When you left, what were the biggest challenges faced by the agency and by taxpayers as well?
So I think the biggest hurdles I saw was morale was incredibly low. People were not feeling good about their jobs, about security. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges. I also think that hiring has always been an issue. Right now there's a hiring freeze. Trying to find qualified applicants has been a challenge. So you combine that with people leaving, a hiring freeze, and a historic issues with finding qualified applicants, particularly in specialized areas. It's very challenging. And then you'll add to that the modernization. The computer systems are incredibly old at the IRS. There's a lot of antiquated systems. Thankfully, in my prior role, I did not have to deal with them very often, but I could see the impact on the agency and the administration of the tax code with these older systems.
Okay. That's been an issue for a very long time. How would you say priorities are shifting at the IRS right now? I'm particularly interested to know what it looks like when one administration transitions to another, and you were there through 3 different administrations, so you were there for some transitions.
Yes, absolutely. So during any transition, the first thing to keep in mind is a lot of things are staying the same. Tax administration, for a very significant part of what the IRS and Chief Counsel do, does not change because there's a different administration. Tax forms still need to be published, information needs to be updated, guidance needs to be provided to taxpayers and PLRs, and changes in method of accounting. Audits continue, litigation goes on. All of these things are continuing to happen regardless of a change in administration. The biggest change in what happens with a change in administration is a freeze on guidance. Whenever there is a turnover, there's always a pause in issuing published guidance because the new administration may have a different focus or want to look at a different area for the published guidance. And keep in mind, as Pam, as you know, to get published guidance out, IRS has to approve it, Chief Counsel has to approve it, and Treasury has to approve it. So all 3 areas have to be aligned that the guidance is a priority and should be moving forward and have the approvals. So we're already seeing that with this administration. Every spring, as part of the priority guidance plan process, IRS and Treasury put out a notice requesting comments from taxpayers and from agents and Chief Counsel, asking for recommendations for the next year's priority guidance plan. That was published this spring, as usually happens. In that document, it particularly highlights and foreshadows that this administration wants to take a new approach to the priority guidance plan. Historically, it has been divided by division, like FIP would have their own section, insurance companies would have their own section in the priority guidance plan that is published. And the document is suggesting that it may look very differently when it is finally published in the fall.
Okay. The business plan is a long-standing thing that the IRS and Treasury have used to coordinate. But so right now we have 2 vacancies in the political appointees. We're still waiting for a Chief Counsel to be confirmed, still waiting for an Assistant Secretary to be confirmed, but we have the Commissioner. So the career staff fills in and moves things along.
Yes, I would anticipate that they're doing a lot of work trying to look at the current items on the priority guidance plan and decide whether it fits within any of the parameters of the request and the notice for published guidance, and trying to figure out what else is being commented on. There have been a number of very helpful comment letters from taxpayers and other folks, and they're already looking at those, trying to decide where they fit in the priorities and how they're going to, if they could move that forward, what would happen. So those conversations are happening, those lists are being prepared, they're getting ready for those political appointees to be in place and to make decisions on what the priority guidance plan will look like in the fall.
So if the reconciliation bill is enacted, or maybe we should say when, what issues do you anticipate for the IRS and taxpayers? What will the IRS do if it's passed?
So I would anticipate that there is going to be a significant amount of work to implement the reconciliation bill. I was with the insurance branch during the TCJA implementation. And for example, we needed to work with forms and publications to create and update forms, update the instructions, and provide a significant amount of guidance to taxpayers. And there was always a discussion of whether or not the guidance should be a regulation, which requires a lot more bandwidth for the agencies, or if it could be IRB guidance, which takes less bandwidth, or could it be something on a website, information or a letter to select taxpayers. So I think there will be a significant amount of work that needs to be done to implement the reconciliation bill, and there will be discussions about the best use of resources to try to implement it and how they do that.
So Alexis, are there any messages you'd like to convey to companies?
Yes, I think the first message I'd like to convey to companies is that it's important for them to remember that many of the people at the IRS and the IRS Office of Chief Counsel feel dedicated to public service, to implementing the tax code fairly and impartially, and they feel that they are doing a public service to our country in implementing the tax code in that way. And I think it's very helpful for companies to keep that in mind when they're interacting with either the agents or with Chief Counsel or other people who are with the government. The second point that I think is very important is taxpayers and companies should continue to try to provide input and information to IRS, to the Office of Chief Counsel, and to Treasury. It's incredibly valuable for someone in one of those positions and in my prior position to get information from taxpayers and from companies about how they are implementing the tax code. What does their business look like? How does that translate to their financial statement and then to their tax return? What are the issues that they are coming across and dealing with when they're trying to implement the tax code in an appropriate way? And how is their business changing that may be causing additional problems and issues as they're trying to figure out the best way to implement a particular tax provision? So companies should keep that in mind and try to go talk to the appropriate person at Treasury and IRS, because that information is incredibly valuable for the people who are there.
Okay, those are really important points for people to take away. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining me for your first episode of Policy on Demand.
Thank you, Pam.
And thank you to our audience for watching. Take care.